question comes from Gigi Gore from YouTube. Are they going to be able to introduce possible motive with the money stuff? Katherine Lizardo, a plaintiff's attorney out of Texas, is also with us this hour. Katherine, I'll send that question over to you. Do you think the judge is going to let the financial stuff in as evidence in this case for the prosecution to prove motive?
The prosecution will definitely try to bring that in. Now, whether the judge will allow it is a whole different story, because we don't want prior bad acts to assume that because he committed that or is charged with that prior bad act, that then he probably committed this murder. It does go to his credibility in terms of his truthfulness. I can see some arguments that can be made to let that in. So, and we have two great lawyers on both sides, and that will be quite a fight.
We have another question, Michael Bryant. This one is for you, Taryn_Synergy from YouTube. And we've been talking so much about the timeline in this case, and would Alex Murdaugh have had time to clean himself up? We've heard about the clothing today. We've had a lot of questions about that. Taryn_Synergy asks, do you think he hired people to kill his wife and son? We haven't heard any evidence of that, certainly, but is that a possibility?
Pass. No, I think anything's a possibility.
Right.
You know, we certainly heard no evidence suggesting that there was some third party, but we do know, at least we believe, that Murdaugh hired somebody to kill him as part of a post-double homicide. I don't know, mea culpa. I'm not quite sure what to call that attempted suicide, if it was in fact that. So we know that Murdaugh is not shy of hiring others to do some dirty work. So yeah, anything is possible.
Anything is certainly possible. And Cousin Eddie is the person who he says he tried to get to help kill himself so Buster could get the life insurance payout. We've covered a lot of cases on this network. I'm not sure we've covered one where somebody has hired somebody or asked somebody to kill themselves. So that's a new one. I think that was a new one for all of us. Sarah Eats World from YouTube asks, so why wouldn't the gunshot residue on the raincoat be enough to prosecute if it was already found? Rich, gunshot residue evidence, I mean, I know what I think of it just based on covering cases and hearing testimony about it over the years. Why is gunshot residue alone not enough?
Well, because you don't know that the gunshot residue got there from the gunshot in question. I mean, it could have got on there from a different gunshot at a different time. I don't know how long gunshot residue stays around, or it could have got on, you could have picked it up at the scene, even if you weren't the one who fired it. So a little bit of gunshot residue itself is probably not enough to build an entire circumstantial case. You have to pile on more evidence than that.
And we know you can get gunshot residue on yourself just from maybe handling a gun, touching a gun. We've heard that type of thing. Dick Harpootlian actually said that in his opening statement, that the amount, and we have to hear testimony about this. Opening statements aren't evidence, of course, but we heard some information in opening statements from Dick Harpootlian that the amount of gunshot residue found on, you know, that raincoat or whatever is what you would get from touching a weapon. So you can't just say that that's enough to prosecute somebody. FT Who Did from YouTube asks, did they test the gun at the scene that wasn't the murder weapon for GSR? I think we're unclear on that, but we don't believe that was that shotgun found at the scene was the murder weapon. So I'll take that question right there. BJM from YouTube asks, do we know who AM called while still at the scene? We know he called a lawyer. He had a lawyer. We were talking about this earlier. He had a lawyer with him when he was being interviewed by law enforcement. So he had a lawyer there. My 2 cents from YouTube asks, Alex's monitor is covered when graphic images are shown. He isn't seeing them, yet he always gets emotional. Is this to get the jury's attention while they are viewing graphic images? Katherine, I know that you're not in the courtroom, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it would be understandable for him to feel that kind of emotion. Now, whether it's real or not, that's where the credibility questions lie. And it's up to the jury to evaluate his credibility. Even though his screen is covered, he hears and definitely understands the description of the witness of what they're actually seeing. Maybe he's revisiting or rethinking how that looked because it was a gruesome crime scene that I would suspect no one will forget, especially of their own son and wife. But again, the credibility is an issue here, and whatever action he's doing, the jury is watching intently.
The jury is definitely watching, and I think everybody following this case is watching his every move as well. Stephanie Smith from YouTube asks, Buster and Maggie's estate settled legal claims for the wrongful death of Mallory Beach in the boat accident on January 11th. Do you think this was a strategic move in any way? Rich Schoenstein, what's your opinion on that?
Well, I think it was a strategic move in some way. I mean, they probably assumed they would have liability if they played it out, so it was better to settle. Now, that could have just been a sensible move in the context of the accident and the litigation itself. Most litigation settles, most civil litigation settles at some point. It's just a matter of getting to the right number at the right point. Was it more strategic because they didn't want a trial to play out in that matter that might affect this other one? I don't know.
Michael, this one's for you because the clothes have been a big topic of discussion today. We are all wondering about Alex Murdaugh's clothes. And, I see pictures of Alex Murdaugh from the past on the screen. He has lost a tremendous amount of weight from the time of his arrest till now. So it's just an observation I've had. But this comes from Matthew Bolin from YouTube. Do you think the Snapchat records, and we've heard about that video that Paul sent the night of the homicides right before 8 o'clock. Do you think the Snapchat records will be key if Alec had on different clothes than what he claimed, or what he was wearing, I should say, when the police arrived?
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I think he's been on that incarceration diet. I think that's what's paying off for him as we see him so much thinner in court. That video, which we're all anxious to see, is what the defense shows. This happy father-son time. They're having a wonderful afternoon together, and then just a few hours later, the dad gruesomely kills his son. That's impossible. That's the defense position. The clothing is another wrinkle, though, that I hadn't really considered. So what we'll have to see when we see that video is, does he have the same clothes on? And more importantly, there was a lot of time passage. We know that from when the video was taken to when the defendant was at the scene and when he met with the police and had on his clean clothes. Not so sure a change of clothes wouldn't have been unreasonable in that time span.
It's possible, but I think it'll be really interesting for this jury to see, was he wearing the white T-shirt that the law enforcement took from Alex Murdaugh that night? Jules from YouTube asks, is Buster named as a defendant in any other case than the Beach case that settled? I don't believe so, but we will check on that for sure. I want to make sure we give you the right information on that. Our next question comes from Tracy Keene from YouTube. Why are witnesses allowed in the courtroom during testimony? I thought they kept them separated during the trial. Katherine, that is something a lot of people have been asking about, because there are some witnesses that we've seen sitting in the gallery, and they are witnesses who are fact witnesses. So why do you think that some of these witnesses are being allowed to sit in the courtroom during the testimony?
Well, it is quite interesting that that's happening, because both lawyers would object to that, and the judge as well. But these fact witnesses, I don't know specifically who are sitting there. Maybe they were already done with their testimony and they won't be called anymore. But usually we see that the witnesses aren't there, so their testimony will not be tainted, or their memories won't be mixed up with another witness's testimony.
Rich, I heard you and Michael talking about this earlier, and Neil Rockkind. Grammy B in North Carolina from YouTube asks, is it standard SLED protocol that cell phones are placed in Faraday bags when collected from crime scenes? And there was an issue with this earlier, Rich.
Yeah, I actually don't know if that's standard protocol, but I will say, and I said to Michael earlier, the cross-examination on that point was brilliant, because the defense lawyer certainly made it sound like it's standard protocol to put it in a Faraday bag or otherwise to make sure that the cell phone isn't capable of receiving information or deleting information while it's transferred. And he established with this witness that instead it was put in a paper bag and transported, as he said, like you would transport a can of pork and beans, which doesn't sound very safe.
Pork and beans. That's the saying of the day. I mean, that was something else when he said that. John Meyerding from YouTube. Michael, I don't think we know the answer to this question, but we were talking about this last hour as well, and our viewers are picking up on this. Whose hair is clutched in Maggie's hand? It was brown hair.
Yeah, I don't even know if we've heard whether it was human or animal or something else, but it is fascinating because obviously the defendant has anything but brown hair. So I don't know. We just don't know, but it's going to be a very important point for the prosecution to fix.
Definitely, and hopefully they will be able to tell us whose hair they think it is or believe it may be. I mean, we don't know if it's animal hair. It very well could be. Alex Bot, this is from Tom Kaiser from YouTube. Alex Bot, or Alec, I should say. I keep pronouncing it two different ways. Sorry about that, but it sounds like a lot of people do that. Alec bought 2 Blackout 300 guns for sons, and Paul's went missing, and Alex soon replaced it. So how many Blackout 300s are accountable now? Katherine, there's been a little bit of confusion about that. Dick Harpootlian said that Paul was notoriously careless with guns and other things. I mean, wasn't unusual for him to leave them laying around. So do we have the exact number of Blackout rifles?
I don't think so, because also let's keep in mind that this family actually has a gun room. During the opening statement and some testimony we've heard, they have about 20 firearms on that property. They are hunters, they're avid hunters and gun owners. So it's not unusual for them to be using guns, and gun safety, of course, they should know and prioritize. But we have heard the Harpootlian say that Paul is careless about those guns. That's probably why it went missing, and a third one had to be bought for him.
And we're going to take one last question here before the break, because we think court should be starting back up in about 5 minutes or so. And we want to get you back in there as soon as that happens. This is from MD Friesen01 Michelle from Twitter. She asks, do we know if SLED did any test fires to see if gunshots could be heard from the main house at Moselle from the dog kennels, since Alex said he was, quote, taking a nap at the time they think the murders took place? We haven't heard anything about that, Michael, but I mean, I guess that's possible.
We really haven't, and it does get me back to my important point, where I will be having graphic representations of this later to give people a sense of how far it is from the main house out to the kennels and the workshop. But no evidence in yet that we're aware of that there were any sound tests done.
And it might not be actually that unusual to hear gunshots out in that area, since
it's called a hunting estate, so,
Yeah, it's a hunting property, and it's out there. But a shotgun, I've been in a shooting range before. When a shotgun is fired, it is loud. Let me tell you, loud.